welcome to this afternoon's virtual session, which I hope will be interactive. I hope it'll be informative. I'm really excited to have our guests here with us today. Just a quick explanation about why our organization, Fair Opportunity Project, is hosting this session. So first of all, by way of introduction, I am a co-director of Fair Opportunity Project, and our organization was founded by college students. So co-founders Cole Scanlon and Luke Hine realized when they got to college that it was a whole lot more complicated than really it should have been, and that there was information out there and they just didn't know how to get to it. And that they also realized that there were a whole lot of other students in the same boat. And so what we do in our organization is we share information. Here's our just a screenshot of our website, where we provide free resources and materials that we hope will help anyone who finds our site with a step-by-step process of how to understand the college application and financial aid process. So one of the things that we do is not only create the materials ourselves through a student team primarily, but we also look for the great stuff that's out there. And we look for groups that are doing similar kinds of things, and groups that are, or organizations that might be offering for instance, a financial aid process or a scholarship platform that we just think is really terrific. So so that explains a little bit of the context, which I'll go into actually in a second. But so we not only share our own information, but we look for the great materials out there. And actually, it's one of the things that I love most about what we're doing. And so that's how we found UpLIFT, who you'll be hearing from here in just a minute. Just another quick couple comments of what you can find from Fair Opportunity Project. So if you were to go to our website, and the URL is there on this screen, you can see that we have guides, we have newsletters, we have a mentorship program, we offer videos, we have a video course. The guides are downloadable, and we update those regularly to verify the information and to add new resources that we're finding. So you can download those guides through our website in, I think we're up to 7 different languages now. So we'd love for you to do that after the webinar if you haven't done it already, and share them around and share a word about them. In the spring, did not know that we'd all be rushing to online learning at the time, but we had launched, we were fortunate to be able to partner with the Harvard Lab Exchange. And through them, we launched Fair Opportunity X, which is a virtual course that consists of a variety of different short modules for self-paced exploration about not only the how and the steps of applying to college, but also the why and the reflection. And so there's a link here on the screen for you to find that. You can also find that link directly through the homepage on our website. And before I forget to mention it, the slides today will be shared with everyone who registered after today's session, as well as the recording. So we are recording this this session, and it also will be available through our YouTube channel. So as I mentioned before, so we have core principles as an organization, and I covered many of those with you already. And hopefully that helps you explain why we reached out and why we connected to UpLIFT. And you'll be hearing more from UpLIFT's founders here in just a minute. But UpLIFT, in short, is addressing a challenge at the medical school level that we are addressing at the undergraduate level. So and also trying to share the information and the insights that they have, so that students can learn this process early enough so that they don't come upon this information in a way that's too late, and that they can't use to create the best plan possible for their future paths. So here's what we'll be doing today. So we're going to start off with just a very broad, very quick medical school snapshot, just so you understand the context of medical school today and admissions. We will also then shift into to looking at UpLIFT as the organization and the guide. And the guide, which you can find through their website, is just an amazingly rich resource, which is too much for what we have time to go into today. So we're just going to pick out just a few items to focus on. And then at the end of the session, we want to be sure to reserve time for a panel with our medical school students and a Q&A. And so be thinking about what questions you may have for that panel, and put them in the chat, and we'll try to monitor those and send them on to the panelists. Okay, so I know we're living our life on Zoom. By this time of the day, we're probably all a little fatigued. So quick quiz. How many medical schools are there in the US? And you can keep that thought in your head. I actually didn't know the answer myself until I looked this up. So all those numbers are pretty low. They're actually much lower than the number of four-year colleges. So we've got actually 2,000, a little over 2,800 four-year colleges in the US. There are actually only 158 medical schools. So you can see that the number of those schools is quite a bit less. And of course, medical school, you need to have the undergraduate degree first. So that's quite a funnel of sorts. Just things to keep in mind. Applications have increased in recent years. Part of that is because medical schools themselves have been trying to expand the numbers of students they can take on, because they know that there will be an increased need for doctors. And as our panelists will be going into, it's important to have a strategy so that you stand out to an admission committee, and our panelists will be talking about those things. MCAT scores, the standardized tests, yes, they are important, but they're not everything. And especially in this year when there have been disruptions to MCAT test sites and so forth, be aware that what is called holistic, admissions and review is going to be playing a big part of this. And part of holistic means that, schools want to know that students are more than, their high GPAs and their high test scores. So another thing to know is that whereas we know, like in college, students go to college, they may not graduate. They may be trying to figure out exactly what their post high school plans are. Medical school, there's much higher graduation rates, and medical students tend to not leave once they start. And when they leave, it may be for personal reasons, because it does take several years to get through medical school. And we hear a lot about loan amounts, but remember that the projected income is also high, and that loan defaults for medical school graduates are actually very, very low. And in some of the ways we're going to touch on today, there are good ways to finance that education, and planning ahead of time is key to knowing how to do that financing. One of the last slides I'm going to share with you before handing this over. So one thing to keep in mind, so medical school access really needs to grow. Certainly medical schools themselves have really are very aware of this and are trying to address that issue. But there's a couple reasons why this is important. So a couple bullet points I just put on the screen here for you. So a large number of medical students are coming from wealthiest households. many people are turning to consulting services, and so that's further limiting applicants to those who can pay. And we also know that rural areas, low-income areas really need more doctors in their communities. And they need doctors who understand the life experiences of the people who live there. And so this is a really core reason why diversity, one of many core reasons why diversity in the medical workforce is so important. And just to show you where we are, this is a big a lot of numbers in a tiny format here for you to see. But the takeaway from this is that, again, while there has been progress in diversifying the medical school graduate population, and there's about 21,000 medical school graduates a year, if we jump forward to seeing what the US population looks like, the takeaway from these two slides is basically that proportion of medical workforce to our actual population is really going to get us the best outcomes for patient care. And there's actually some really fascinating and really important studies on that a medical workforce that is reflective of the population that is here in the US is really going to lead to the best health outcomes. So I'll leave that those takeaways there, and I'm going to hand this over for introductions from our panelists here.
Cool. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Carol, for that introduction and the background. It's always so interesting to see the statistics and data on medical school admissions. And I think you've really beautifully captured a lot of the motivation for why we're doing the work that we're doing. So just as a quick introduction, my name is Eric Lee. I'm currently a second-year medical student at the University of Pennsylvania. And we started UpLIFT. You can see the homepage on the screen. Oops, yeah, sorry. You can see the home screen up there on the page on the screen. And what we are is we put together a compilation of our own personal experiences in applying to medical school to try to make the information a lot of that sort of social knowledge that sort of gets passed around word of mouth that is so critically important for succeeding in the medical school application process. And having a good understanding of the field, we wanted to make that information as broadly available and as accessible as possible. So that's really the sort of spirit and ultimately the product that we put out for the UpLIFT project. All of this work is really guided by our mission. And our mission is that we're striving to create a more equitable medical workforce by providing prospective applicants from underrepresented, low-income, and first-time student backgrounds with access to comprehensive, up-to-date information about successfully applying and matriculating to medical school. And we started this project earlier this year, and we've had just a terrific team come together, mostly at the University of Pennsylvania. So I'm also going to let Michaela, my co-lead on this project, introduce herself.
All right, hi everyone. My name is Michaela, and I have a little bit of a long story to tell you just about how I got here. So I'll try to talk kind of fast, but let me know if I'm being too quick and you can't understand me. But yeah, I'm currently also a second-year medical student at the University of Pennsylvania, and I'm originally from Southern New Jersey. And perhaps many of you don't know this, but New Jersey does actually have some rural parts. We are the Garden State after all, and I just happen to have grown up in one of those rural towns. So I attended a public high school with about 300 students per class, but my middle school had only 30 students in my 8th grade class, and that was only after we combined with a neighboring middle school that was being shut down. So you get it, pretty small town, but I was lucky enough to be only an hour outside of Philadelphia, where we definitely have a number of really great health systems. I knew from a really young age that I wanted to be a doctor. I loved my pediatrician because he roller skated, and I wanted to be a fun doctor too, so that people didn't hate going to the doctor like so many of mine. I'm sure also your friends and relatives do. But as you can tell, since my perception of being a doctor at the time was someone who had the freedom to roller skate at work all day and just make kids feel better, you can tell I didn't really know what becoming a doctor entailed. And honestly, neither did my parents, because when I kind of dropped the bomb on them that I wanted to go to an elite, like private 4-year institution, they had to admit to me that they didn't have a dime saved for my college education. So despite that, my parents were actually really super supportive and took me to a number of schools that we thought would give me a good financial aid package because of my family's income. And I ended up at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., where I got my bachelor's of science in global health and became the first person in my immediate family to graduate college. College was definitely hard, and it wasn't the grades that were hard for me personally. I knew how to do school. I was doing that my whole life. Rather, it was the connecting with people from very different backgrounds than my own that was such a struggle, and honestly, probably still is to this day. It wasn't until I started volunteering in the pediatric unit at the hospital on campus and working in the nursing simulation lab on campus, where I set up patient scenarios for nursing students, that I felt like I had really made the right decision by going to Georgetown. That's when I really felt like I was there doing what I was supposed to be doing. Beyond that, the classes that kind of solidified to me that I really wanted to keep pursuing this dream of becoming a doctor and go into medicine were my maternal and child health course, where we talked about a lot of the diseases and things that can go wrong as a child and when a mother is pregnant, and then my human biology course, which was basically just an anatomy course. And it's actually my love of anatomy, which has persisted to this day, even after anatomy lab upgraded from cats to actual humans now in medical school, that has really steered me towards a surgical subspecialties. And I have yet to do any clinical rotations, so we'll see if I still want to go into surgery after another year or so. But right now, that's kind of the plan. And overall, it's really just kind of a complete dream for me to be at Penn in medical school. And I hope to stay here throughout my training and career after medical school too. But I often feel like I have no idea how to make that happen, which is how I felt along my entire journey in higher education, really. And I guess with that, like learning how to be vulnerable and put my story on display to admissions committees in order to get into these elite schools has been really tough. And higher education, especially in the medical field, is so much more than school and grades, which again, I knew how to do, been doing it my whole life, but it's also networking, it's extracurricular involvement, you got it, you name it, it's all of that. So, and you have to do all of that again, while staying true to yourself and your interests. So I learned really late in undergrad at Georgetown that a lot of my experiences of being lost in this realm of higher education stem from my first generation background, meaning that neither of my parents completed a 4-year degree. And it's with these fellow like first generation and low income students that I find the most similarities in my experiences. So that's really led me to become a co-leader of the Penn Med FGLI student group, where my interests lie in increasing the likelihood of FGLI students like myself having success in this field. And UpLIFT, as well as a podcast I've been recently starting with some other FGLI students called MedLegs, are two of the ways I'm really trying to amplify the narratives of FGLI students and increase our representation in medicine. So I'm really grateful to all of you for joining, and I'm excited to be here today as you all start thinking about your own journey in the medical field too.
Thanks. Yeah, just a little bit about me. As I mentioned, I'm a second-year medical student at the University of Pennsylvania, and I originally grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I went to Harvard, graduated in 2018 with a degree in chemical and physical biology. And my story about, how I came into medicine and how I ended up involved with UpLIFT really starts actually in high school. I think my journey to medicine is similar to a lot of other people's journeys to medicine. I was really inspired by a family experience with medicine and healthcare. My grandmother actually was diagnosed with Alzheimer's while I was early in high school, and I was really moved, and that experience of sort of watching and trying to take care of her as she struggled with Alzheimer's disease, as well as seeing really firsthand the impact that a handful of really good clinicians had on not only my grandmother but also our family as a whole. Really inspired me to really inspired my interest in medicine. So, I think I started thinking about medicine, even when I was a high school student. So it doesn't start, when you get to college. Eventually, after graduating from college and then matriculating to the University of Pennsylvania, I was inspired to start the UpLIFT project, sort of reflecting on the whole process and the complexity and the effort that it took to apply and then matriculate to medical school. I found myself recognizing that I had so many resources and so many people to talk to as well as, just a lot of resources and knowledge at my disposal. And then after matriculating to the University of Pennsylvania and realizing that about 90% of us in the medical school class had parents who had, an advanced degree like postgraduate education, either master's or PhD, I think it really sort of dawned on me that not everybody had access to the same level of resources and sort of like informal knowledge and networks that really make a medical school, a difficult process, somewhat easier. I was also inspired by my experiences growing up in Albuquerque and being really moved by the diversity, not only of the communities at large, but also the school that I went to. And I really wanted to contribute and try to help make medicine also a more inclusive and accessible field for everybody. So that's sort of the background on us. In terms of what we've actually done with the UpLIFT guide is we put together an 18-chapter guide that essentially our goal is to make it kind of a one-stop shop for the knowledge that you need to, the knowledge and understanding that you need to apply to medical school. So our motivation is to cover the process from start to finish, from thinking about if medicine is right for you, all the way to how preparing for medical school in terms of doing shadowing, internship, lab research. And then we also spent a lot of time just navigating the practical issues of the actual medical school application process. There are a lot of, essentially practical issues to hit: how to write your personal statement, how to prepare for interviews, how to negotiate for financial aid and packages, as well as putting together resources like spreadsheets to keep track of your academic requirements, timelines to help you keep track of the various dates and deadlines that you need to meet. We're really trying to make this process as easy and as simple as possible. So now just sort of transitioning and shifting gears in our presentation, Michaela and I would like to hit a couple of what we think are the highest yielding questions for students thinking of entering the healthcare field, or parents or guidance counselors who are also trying to help support and guide a student thinking about entering the healthcare field. So Michaela and I are just going to sort of switch off for the next couple of questions. The first one that we think is a good place to start is just, how do you know what healthcare field you should enter? So one thing that I've noticed in thinking about and working on medical school admissions is that a lot of the times I think there's this sort of conflation of the healthcare field being physicians, and that's not true. We, as medical students, sort of inhabit that role in that world, but the healthcare field is not just doctors. There's actually a huge range of different professions that you can enter, from physicians to nurses to physician assistants, nurse practitioners, advanced practice nurses, pharmacists, and physical therapists and occupational therapists. So just sort of giving a brief overview of the differences between each of these healthcare fields. Starting with physicians, you essentially have a large degree of independence, and your responsibilities vary a bit depending on which specialty you enter, but ultimately it's all around centered around caring for the patient and helping to manage their care. And it's a bit of a managerial role as well in sort of coordinating their care with the other teams. You have a large base of knowledge and skills, but also among the medical professions, the longest training, which includes 4 years of an undergraduate degree, 4 years of medical school, and then several additional years of training in residency and fellowships. Physician assistants are sort of another very, very popular choice for students thinking about the healthcare professions. Physician assistants essentially carry out similar responsibilities to physicians, and they often have a fair degree of autonomy, but oftentimes due to the legal requirements, they must have a relationship with the physician, so they're not fully independent. Oftentimes students applying to be physician assistants also require more hands-on patient care experience before they apply. Nurse practitioners and advanced practice nurses are similar to PAs in that they're oftentimes more like first-line advanced providers, especially in areas that have limited healthcare access. Recently, the past few times I've been to see the quote-unquote doctor, I've also seen nurse practitioners who have taken great care of me instead. Nurse practitioners also have varying levels of independence that essentially depend on the state. And then the degree here is a BSN, sort of as a prerequisite to applying into this field. Pharmacists are really medication experts working to prepare and dispense prescriptions. They work really collaboratively with a variety of medical professionals, including physicians, and they also interact with patients. And pharmacists' main responsibilities are to help guide providers in medication choices and medication management. And then finally, one other healthcare profession that we wanted to talk briefly about are physical therapists and occupational therapists. So physical therapists help maintain mobility and quality of life of patients through movement and exercise, and they also work on education. They oftentimes prescribe exercise and activities, and they require similar pre-professional studies to other health professions listed here, including a bachelor's degree. Occupational therapists focus on adapting the environment and the task to fit the person, which is similar to physical therapists, but also, slightly different. They're both focused on helping the patient sort of improve their quality of life, but through slightly different approaches. So occupational therapists are really focused on helping to adapt the environment or the task to fit the person to help enable that person to carry out their individual activities. So that kind of covers it in terms of a quick survey in terms of the variety of professions available to you in the healthcare field that are worth considering. So the next thing that we wanted to talk about is a little bit more specific to the MD admissions process only, but we wanted to talk about this idea of holistic review because I think in sort of the admissions world it gets thrown around a lot. So we wanted to sort of discuss like what holistic review really means. And sort of a definition that I like is that holistic review is a flexible and individualized way of assessing an applicant's capabilities through balanced consideration being given to experiences, attributes, academic metrics, and when considered in combination, how the individual might contribute value as a medical student and a future physician. To sort of simplify that a little bit, essentially, holistic review looks at a variety of factors, and admissions committees care about your whole applications. Everything from your experiences, your attributes, academic metrics, all individually and in combination. In the past, I think medical school admissions have been very academic centric. There's been a lot of focus on the GPA and the MCAT. And what holistic review is that while academic achievement is still important, it's not really the only thing that an admissions committee looks for. Holistic review also prioritizes having a diverse learning environment. Now, how do they actually sort of use a framework to evaluate you in the process of holistic review? I often think about the evaluation process as being an evaluation of fit by looking at three big buckets of an applicant's experiences. These include pre-professional competencies as sort of the first big bucket. So this includes things like service orientation, social skills, communication, and resilience, which are all qualities that are sort of indicative of being a good future clinician and being good at taking care of patients in the future. The second big bucket is sort of your thinking and reasoning competencies. So these skills are obviously valuable and really essential to being a good clinician as well in the future. And then the third being sort of your hands-on science competencies, as this is, again, a large component of training as well as future career skills as a physician. Now, what does the applicant really accomplish? The application really accomplishes two things. It's a sort of two-way channel of communication, essentially to communicate that you and the school are the right fit for each other, and that two, you are proficient in the core competencies that we just described.
So now moving on to what are some of the best ways to prepare for medical school as you're very early in your journey still thinking about college. And as Eric went through, there are a number of things that medical schools look for, such as a high grade point average or GPA, especially in your science courses, as well as significant involvement in extracurriculars such as research, volunteering, and shadowing doctors. And the components of each of these factors, as well as tips for what classes you to take and the extracurriculars to be involved in or to think about being involved in, can really be found in our guide. And we also have tips about again, like what extracurriculars you should be involved in and how to make sure that you're still staying true to your interests, because it really shouldn't be about resume building. It should be doing what you really love, and medical schools will value that way more than just doing things for the sake of doing them to get into medical school. So, and I think one common misperception that many people have is that you have to major in a science such as biology or chemistry to go to medical school. And that's actually not true at all. Medical schools do not require you to major in anything specific. And in fact, I would argue that it makes you a better applicant sometimes when you major in something else, because you bring excess knowledge to the field of medicine outside of science. So if you think about it, most people in medical school have a science degree, but if you have some other knowledge in addition to that, you look like you are bringing some kind of diversity to the school. That's not to say that, like, if you absolutely love science, that is your one true passion, by all means go into it. But like for me personally, I didn't want to spend a lot of time in a lab when I was in undergrad. So I went the global health route and got to study abroad and just do a lot of other things that I was more interested in at the time. But that being said, all medical schools do still require you to complete a number of core courses, and these core courses are usually your science courses. So on the screen, you can see, I have the link to a source that you'll get later, but basically this is what's on the AAMC website, which is like the national organization that kind of governs all medical schools. And it just kind of has some general courses that you should aim to take when you're in college. So they include general chemistry, organic chemistry, biochemistry, physics, biology, and math classes like calculus and statistics. And many medical schools also require genetics or molecular biology, sociology, and/or psychology classes. And these are helpful for your MCAT as well, which is the medical school equivalent to the SAT, and which Eric will be talking about next. But also not only your major, but even these general requirements that kind of have some like flexibility in what you do with them. For instance, I never took intro to sociology or intro to psychology like many pre-med students do. Rather, many of my global health classes actually fulfilled the sociology and psychology components, since global health really is the study of populations and their behavior, which is what sociology and psychology also teach you. So I also didn't take a traditional biology course, and instead I took human biology, which is basically an anatomy course, and I got to skip all the plant stuff, which I also really loved. So when you look at individual medical schools online, each of them will list their specific requirements for courses, and also just like their average GPA for that year and the average MCAT score for their applicants that year, just so you have a gauge of what they're looking for at each one. And I remember personally this being really overwhelming and frustrating, because it seemed like each school had slightly different requirements. And I would have never known that these requirements really were more about demonstrating competency rather than like checking like explicit boxes and explicit courses if I didn't go and see my academic and pre-health advisor. So kind of to recap, my two pieces of advice really for the best ways to prepare for medical school right now as you're thinking about going to college is that first, if you don't want to major in science, say you have another interest like English or public health, then major in something else if you really want to. But again, by all means, if your interest is purely science, please major in science. Please do the science things that you want to do, like have fun in college and explore your interests. That is what college is really for. And second, in your college search, make sure that they have pre-health advisors at the schools that you're looking at, and take stock and ask the school and current students at the colleges you're looking at about how many people the pre-med advisors are advising and how personalized their advice will be to you. For instance, my pre-med advisor was actually also my academic dean for the global health major itself. So he had a great sense of like my major and how to get into med school with the courses that I needed to take for my major. So once you find a school with this resource, make contact with those people early and tell them your plan to go to medical school, and come up with a 4-year plan of courses to take with that advisor to help you reach that goal with the major that you also intend to take. And again, if you're undetermined when you go to college, like that's also fine. A lot of people go to college, they're undetermined in their major, and you just take some core requirements until you figure out what you want to study and or what you're really interested in. And then again, you have this 4-year plan, and you can always revise it later if your plans change. And that's really that pre-med advisor's job. So please utilize them when you go.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk briefly about some quick tips on the MCAT. So the MCAT stands for the Medical College Admissions Test. You guys might know about this, but it's a test. It's essentially a standardized test that's part of the medical school application process. Usually students take the MCAT either in their junior or senior year of college, usually the year before they plan on applying to medical schools. This is kind of, traditionally been thought of as like a big, scary test. There's been a lot of different, resources devoted to this. And it's a long test. There's a lot of content on it, but also just like a totally manageable, it's just another part of the application process. It's definitely very, very achievable, very doable. And really, I think a lot of people's experiences after they prepare and take the test, it's really just, not that bad. Just a couple of quick tips. I know for a lot of students, this might be a little bit, further down the road in their process. Like if you are thinking of applying to college or, you're early on in college, I wouldn't stress too much about the MCAT. It's a pretty comprehensive sort of knowledge and reasoning based test that covers a wide amount of content. And really the best preparation for taking the MCAT is just doing well in your coursework in your four-year degree program at college. Taking those science classes that Michaela just talked about, studying well and making sure that you're understanding the concepts in those classes, that's really going to be the highest yielding preparation that you can do for the MCAT. When you eventually do get to the process and the time in sort of your life and your sort of path to medicine, where it's time to start thinking about seriously about applying of taking the MCAT, then you can also put together a more planned studying program for preparing to actually take the test. Just a couple of quick tips on that. The most important part of studying for the MCAT is just to have a plan. It's not something that you can really cram for. So, like something like the SAT, you really want to get yourself and put yourself in a situation where you have enough time to make sure you're ready for that actual exam. Usually a lot of students take between 10 and 20 weeks to actually study, just so you're not forced to deal with a lot of content all at once, and you can kind of digest it and get it into your brain over time. Usually also people like to break it up into two parts. The first part of studying for the MCAT is really focused on content review and making sure you know the concepts. And then the second part of test prep is actually practicing those test taking skills and becoming comfortable with the format and taking a couple of practice tests just to get you warmed up for the big test day. I also often advise people to help to really just build a process. In other words, hitting a weekly amount of like question bank problems or reading chapters in books at sort of a predetermined timeline just to help you reach those goals. And then not to really stress out over the small things like scores on practice tests or day-to-day performance on your problem sets. Just sort of check in periodically and follow your process. I also think it's really helpful to ask and get feedback from older students. There are always some small changes in the question and the test format from year to year. So I often think it helps to get some feedback and advice from older students, or what we call like near peer mentors. And then finally, I think there's sort of this new cottage industry surrounding the MCAT and test prep. It can get really expensive, but also don't let that be intimidating. There are a lot of ways to prep for the MCAT without breaking the bank, and you can also check out the UpLIFT guide in the sections that we've written about that if this is something that you're on your mind and you'd like to get some more details on.
So now going into the general timeline for medical school applications, this is really far off for you, and it honestly never made sense to me until I went through it firsthand, but there are many parts to the medical school application. First, you submit your AMCAS or primary application, and this usually opens around June 1st of each year. And this application is similar to the common application for college applications, and you just insert your personal statement, which explains why you want to go to medical school, your resume, and all your demographic information. Many medical school applications are rolling, so the sooner you submit your primary application, the better. And medical schools do not have many seats in each class year, and again, there's not many medical schools. So once they fill their class, they stop interviewing people. And so you want to be there early for your best chances of securing a seat. On that first application, you will tell the computer what schools you're applying to, and like each school you add costs additional money to apply to. So as a reference, I believe the average medical school applicant applies to about 18 schools. Though some do less, I only did 13, and some do way more. Like I know people that do 25. Next, all the schools that receive the primary application send you a secondary application, which asks you a few essay questions about why you want to attend their school in particular. So again, I submitted one primary application, but then I submitted 13 secondary applications. And they usually start sending these around mid-July. It's best practice to turn these applications around within 2 weeks of receiving them. And lastly, after doing that, schools will either decide to invite you or not to invite you to visit the school for an interview day. And interviews generally start around mid-August and run until February or March. You get to tour the school, meet students and faculty, and both you and the school are seeing if you're a good fit for each other. After interviewing, you write thank yous to everyone you met, especially your interviewers, and a weighted email or phone call telling you whether you got in. Some schools call you within 2 weeks, depending on when their admissions committee meets to review the applicants that interviewed recently. Others, like Penn, for instance, where Eric and I go, they wait until they've interviewed everyone and let you know in March. So you usually have to make a refundable deposit to hold your spot in the class at each of the medical schools that you're accepted to. And then you make your final decision by April 30th. Before this, you've hopefully visited the school a second time to learn more and help with your decision. And basically, I tell you all, again, you really shouldn't worry about this too much right now, but I'm just kind of showing you that it is about an entire year that you've just spent applying to medical school. And if you plan to go straight to medical school right after college, you will start applying at the end of your junior year. And that means you have to have completed most of the core requirements for medical school and your MCAT before your junior year. If you want to take a gap year, you won't apply to the end of your senior year in undergraduates. And then many students also take more than one gap year to work or pursue other interests before like really hunkering down again for medical school. For reference, I took my MCAT in May of my junior year. I was finishing the last of my general requirements course-wise that semester. So I was actually in my biochemistry course and studying for it for my MCAT. I'd written my personal statement though, and my resume back in October before that, and reviewed it with the Career Services Office at Georgetown. Highly recommend utilizing your Career Services Office. But basically I did that all like in my fall semester, so I didn't have to worry about it while I was studying during the spring semester. And that way, as soon as I got my MCAT result, like on June 5th, I submitted it, and I had submitted my primary application within like the first week. So yeah. And then as far as how COVID-19 has really changed things, this year's application season has been pushed back by about a month. So people didn't start interviewing until mid-September this cycle. Also, there's about 10,000 applicants this year, whereas there's usually about 7,000 per year. Again, for only 158 schools, each school having about a class size of 100 to 200 people. And I'm not sure if this increase in applicants and therefore like greater odds against individuals getting in will continue, but it's likely that this pandemic will be a defining moment that propels many people into the field. All of our interviews are also virtual this season. This was absolutely unheard of when I applied. So in fact, I was in Australia studying abroad when I was invited to interview, and I had to call and email schools asking for a time extension in order to interview once I got home so I could come see them in person because, again, you didn't do virtual interviews. So the virtual interviews definitely have some pros. There's less travel time and cost involved, as well as, and there's also some cons. What if you don't have stable internet? It's way harder to connect with people over the computer, and it's way harder to get a sense of the school that you're going to be spending at least 4 years of your life at. So yeah, overall, it's really far away from you. I think the greatest challenge in the time of COVID-19 will be for you guys going into college right now is engaging in extracurriculars and meeting new people at the undergrad that you go to. It will be a challenge to shadow and volunteer in clinics. I personally have been taking this time to further my work in other areas that I'm interested in, including the creation of the UpLIFT guide and my podcast, MedLegs for first generation and low income students. So I really encourage you all to find ways to stay engaged and pursue your individual interests during this time. And I think that will really, like, staying engaged and finding something during this time will definitely make you stand out in the sea of applicants down the road who are all kind of stranded at home with nothing to do. And then the last thing that we're going to talk about is finances and how to budget and cover medical school costs before, during, and after medical school. And this is really a rough one. Not only does medical school itself cost a lot, but the actual application itself costs thousands of dollars. Our guide gives detailed explanations of a few different things. The first is the fee assistance program for medical school applications. And this is a program that will waive the cost of sending your primary and sometimes even your secondary applications to schools which participate in the program. But it really stinks if you don't make the cutoff for this program. So it's usually for really low income students that is defined by like a federal guideline for low income. To give you a sense of the costs associated with applying, the MCAT study course that I took, for instance, was $2,500. Again, there are ways that you don't have to break the bank with this. The MCAT itself is about $300. My primary application was about $700. The secondary application was about $90. So sending 13 cost me about $1,200. And then traveling to every single school I went to interview at, which was about 8 of them. So you can see how things really add up. And like, not only do you travel to the interviews, sometimes you spend the night because they'll sometimes have things the night before where you can meet some current students. And again, you just see how things add up. Beyond applying to medical school, there is this myth floating around in the world that there's like no financial aid in medical school. That's totally false. Just like an undergrad, you submit a free application for federal student aid or FAFSA, which I always say kind of wrong. So forgive me if I kind of butchered that. But basically you use that to determine your eligibility for loans. And many schools also use this document along with your parents' tax returns to determine what is called your family's expected contribution, or how much that school expects your family to actually pay for you to go to school there. Depending on the amount of money the school has, the financial aid office then works to like meet the rest of that contribution, either through loans, which have to be paid back, or grants, which don't have to be paid back. Of note, private institutions with more money cost more, but they also have a lot more money to give you in order to meet your family's expected contribution through grants. So if you're able to apply to elite undergraduate schools and medical schools, don't let the cost deter you. See what you can get from them financial aid-wise. So then there's also a couple medical schools such as NYU, which have moved to making tuition completely free. You then would only have to pay for housing in New York City, which is still very expensive though. But there are some medical schools making that movement, so it'll be interesting to see how many there are in the next few years. And other ways to finance medical school and even undergrad are by applying for merit-based scholarships or aid based on your accomplishments rather than your family's financial circumstances. So many schools will automatically put you in the running for merit-based aid just by applying, but make sure that's the case, and you can always email their financial aid offices to see what merit-based like scholarships they have for you to apply to. And also your high school guidance department probably has a number of organizations and like local organizations which are looking to give out scholarships to people that are going to be going to college. Another thing I did when applying to medical school was reach back out to those organizations that gave me scholarships in high school and tell them that I was now going to medical school, kind of give them a life update and ask them if they had any additional scholarships that they may be eligible for so that I could apply for some funding again. And I did get like 1 or 2 people they were really ecstatic that I was continuing my education, and they kind of just gave me some more money, which was awesome. Again, more detailed explanations of all of these are in your guide or in the guide, and there's also a better explanation of like different types of loans that you can take out and things like that.
All right, thank you so much. It's a fascinating field to me, and again, as we've put in the chat, the guide that you can very easily download from the UpLIFT guide website goes into all of these and many more sections in a really wonderful, straightforward way. So all of this should be intended to, I guess, just be a teaser to all of you to dig in and learn more. So, so now we're going to get to the point of questions. And if you put them in the chat, I will read them out loud to our panelists, Eric and Michaela. And then I have some other ones too, but I'm sure that you'll help me out here. Okay, so one question, is it even possible for international students to study medicine in the US? And I don't know, Eric, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I can start with that. Yes, it is possible for international students to study medicine in the U.S. In fact, there are a couple of students in our class that come from a variety of sort of different backgrounds and also different countries. I think the process of applying as an international student can be harder or easier, and that really depends a lot on the school that you go to, and also what country you're applying from, and sort of like what your personal background is. It's not sort of like, it's hard to speak in generalities about what it's like to apply as an international student. That being said, we actually also work together with another organization just founded out of Harvard Medical School. So I would encourage you, I think I see this question is from Bishoy, to check out F1 Docs. And F1 Docs is an organization that is founded with the sort of express intent of supporting international students who are applying to medical school. So I think you can find some more resources there.
Okay, great. Lots of questions. I love it. Here's another one. What's the medical school experience? What's the day-to-day life like? Michaela, you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, so right now it's a little different, but basically when we started as first years last year, we went to school from 9 to about 1 p.m. every day, and that included lectures in the morning. So we usually have 2 to 3 lectures, and they're about 1 hour. And then we'll have a 2-hour small group where we go with a learning team. So we have about 6 or 7 students. They're always the same students. We stick with them throughout all 4 years of medical school. But again, all medical schools do this a little bit differently. But usually you have some kind of lecture component every day, and then a small group collaborative component where you work through different case studies to kind of put that lecture material to the test. So that's like our morning. We have a lunch break where we usually go to a lunch talk, try to get some free food somewhere. There's always someone having a conference that you can go to and just learn about specific topics that are very cool. And then in the afternoon, what happens is sometimes we have off. That's like something very special to Penn. They'll give you off to go take other classes on other like parts of the campus. So for instance, I'm taking some public health courses because I'm pursuing my master's in public health as well. You can also use that time to absolutely like study or just like do nothing or go play sports and just like be a human. They really encourage that. And I think that when you look at medical schools and colleges too, you should look at places that encourage you to do things outside of school and again, be a human. But if we don't have a free afternoon, what we'll do is we'll have a course called Doctoring, where we kind of talk to each other about different like ethical things in medicine to think about when we go into the field, and which usually has like another lecture, and then we talk to each other and kind of like debrief about it. Or we'll have some like another thing called Introduction to Clinical Medicine, where we learn our clinical skills and how to do a history and physical exam. So that's usually 2 to 3 afternoons a week, and that's kind of what our schedule looks like each week.
Great. We have another question. What's the difference between graduate school and medical school? And I suppose it's Eric's turn. I know, Michaela, actually you are doing, I think, a dual degree. So I don't know.
Yeah, I could do that. So
Okay.
medical school is a type of graduate school. Graduate school, at least how I understand it, is just like any kind of schooling that you do beyond your undergraduate career. So graduate school, you go for like a master's degree or a PhD. So for instance, my master's in public health is technically like a graduate school program, whereas medical school is a type of graduate school program, but you're specifically getting your MD. Does that make sense? I don't know if Eric has anything to add to that.
Yeah, one other thing that I would add to it is I think in sort of thinking about like what the MD degree is like, it's almost kind of like a liberal arts degree in like human biology and physiology. So you really get like a wide sort of survey of a lot of understanding of like different fields within medicine, and you come away with sort of this broad understanding of human physiology. in a lot of graduate programs like master's or PhD programs, I think it's a lot deeper and more focused and narrower. So if you're applying into thinking about like a PhD, I think you have to sort of think about where do your interests intellectually lie? Do you want to come away with this sort of like broad understanding of human physiology, or do you really want to drill down and investigate and research, you know, a handful of genes or a new technique, or, you know, the function of like a protein, structure of a protein, something like that? Like, what kind of thinker are you? And then additionally, with the MD degree, the MD degree is really sort of, it's a very practical and instrumental degree, because it's the foundation which you use to go and then take care of patients. So I think it's also differentiated from graduate school in that respect, where I think a lot of graduate programs are much more focused on the academic and the intellectual component, like the process of discovery, and medicine is much more people oriented.
Great. Tessa asks, what can I do in high school to help me prepare for medical school?
I can also briefly answer this one. Tessa, I think it's awesome that you are thinking about medical school, and like we really want to encourage and support you in that process. I think the best thing that a high school student can do is to sort of just keep in mind the things that we've talked about in thinking about a career in medicine, and sort of try to take that and keep that sort of mental roadmap of applying to medical school, and keep those things that we've discussed in mind when you hit college. So I think when you start college, making those early connections with pre-med groups, near peer mentors, and career advising services. And then, you know, just taking college, and especially the first couple years, freshman year, sophomore year of college, to really try and explore that interest in medicine deeply. Try to shadow a clinician, just, you know, reach out, cold email some clinicians. We also have some tips of how to do this in our guide. Volunteer at you know, in whatever capacity interests you, and sort of get a sense of how you feel when you serve people, sort of in that role, and really just take the first couple of years of college in trying to suss out your interest and how you feel, by just getting exposure to medicine.
Okay, great. We have a question from Ella about how long does it take to find a job after graduating from medical school?
So I can do this one. So basically you go to medical school for 4 years, and then in your 4th year of medical school, you apply to residency programs. So hopefully after you do your clinical rotations in your 3rd year and like some electives in your 4th year, you know what specialty you want to go into, and you apply to different hospitals around the country that have residency programs in that specialty. So you do that during your 4th year, and then in March of your 4th year, you match with one of the programs that you applied to. So then like in June, you graduate like in May, and in June you start residency, and you are actually paid during residency. So you have a job for the next, depending on your residency, 3 to like 7 years basically. And residents are paid less than like a full-blown physician, but you have an MD, you're just practicing under like an attending, if that makes sense. So basically an attending already graduated from residency, and they have like full practicing license. And as a resident, you're kind of underneath of the attending's license, but you get to see patients on your own and report them to the attending. And he's kind of there to like help you out, if that helps. But you have a job after med school pretty soon.
So I do want to respect our panelists' time. We are at our official end, and I know they are very busy people. I don't know, Eric, we have several more questions in the chat. If you are able, you and Michaela are able to stick on the webinar a little bit longer, or?
I'm good to stay, yeah.
Okay, and let me just, for everyone else on the call, you may be having to jump off. The final slide here are just some resources for digging deeper. So before I go back to the questions here, again, don't forget about the guide at the UpLIFT website. It is really terrific. It is really extensive. You can, download it, refer to it back and, forth. It's just a great resource. The AAMC website, again, Michaela and Eric both have been referring to that a lot. They do have a lot of really detailed information for students who are interested in medical school. So that's worth checking out. And then finally, as Michaela mentioned, reach out to your career services. Ask those questions. Make sure that you utilize the resources and the advisors that you have at your college. So those are just some key ways. And then I just want to make sure again, and this will be on the slides that are sent out to all of you following the webinar today. There's an email address that you can send your questions to our panelists, and there are many others on the UpLIFT team. Again, there's the website URL. So that's all that information. And again, this recording will be available on the Fair Opportunity Project YouTube channel, and that link will be also sent out to you via email. So let me jump back on the questions here. So Ranga asks, does the rank of the medical school affect the level of residencies that the student can get into? And Eric, were you able to stay on?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you like to tackle that one?
Sure, yeah. It's an interesting question. Obviously, everything has a rank these days. Colleges are ranked, medical schools are ranked. In theory, residencies are also ranked as well. I think in thinking about applying to residencies, I mean, that's way down the line. I would say that even for Michaela and I, that's sort of like a decision that feels distant for us. I mean, we haven't done our clinical rotations yet. So, I would sort of preface all of this by saying that, I think it's sort of something that's farther down the line. In thinking about applying to residencies, I would also sort of, I think, shy away from the framework of thinking about residencies as sort of like a hierarchical, like ranked list, one being strictly better than another. I think when it comes to residency, and when you're thinking about, spending anywhere from 3 to 7 to 9 years of your life, and this is where you work, right? So you're spending 80 hours a week at your job, basically. Certain things become a little bit more important. Things like how you feel at the institution, like whether you feel like it's a good fit for you, how you get along with people in the department, where the program is located. It's like, do you want to be on the East Coast? Do you want to be on the West Coast? Do you want to be like in the Midwest? Do you want to be in the Southwest? Like, these are all questions that I think start to feel a little bit more important than, what the quote unquote rank of the residency is. So, like, in short, I think that applying to residencies, it's a multifactorial decision. There are a lot of different factors that come into play, and it's kind of a complicated process, and also definitely down the road for everybody.
I would just add to that, bringing it a little bit closer to home, even to colleges. I ended up being unhappy sometimes at college because I don't know if I chose a college for the right reasons in the beginning. And it took me a while to find out how to, again, be a person in college and that person that I liked being. So I do think that even when you're finding colleges and medical schools, not just residencies, like, of course you want to set yourself up the best that you can, but at the end of the day, you are learning the same things at each of these places, and the things that are different at like an Ivy League versus your state college is going to be I think the people you meet and the experiences you have outside of the classroom. And those are maybe what you should be focusing some of your decisions on. And then something else, like, again, like Eric said, just really paying attention to yourself and the person that you are and how you're going to stand out most. So I think some people may go to a really elite college and kind of get lost in the crowd where everyone is really great at and doing a bunch of things. Whereas you may be able to, if you know yourself really well, you may know that you better stand out by going to a smaller college closer to home, or not even closer to home, but just a smaller college where you can really stand out. And like maybe not everyone's doing 50 million different things like it seems some people are doing at these elite and private institutions, but you can, and then you stand out, and then when you apply to the next step, they'll notice that.
Great. So let's take maybe just a couple more questions here, and I will, again, I'll put the email address here on the screen for the rest of you to be able to follow up. Yara asks, did you do any shadowing or internship opportunities while in high school, and do you recommend them? I don't know, Eric, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. I'm thinking back to the programs I was doing in high school. I think in high school, I had much more of a sort of, I guess, general and exploratory approach to my interest in like science and medicine. You know, in fact, I would say that like if you have an opportunity to do some shadowing or you know, do an internship in high school, I would recommend that. Like getting some early exposure, I think is awesome. That being said, I have found that like the shadowing and sort of the internships that I've done to really be tremendously much more impactful as a medical student, just because I think when you start to learn the biology, the physiology, like the actual medicine, when you go and shadow what they're talking about, the patient interactions, they all start to make a lot more sense. And you start to see how things that you're learning about in the classroom are relevant to, you know, patient care. So I would say, yeah, I would recommend shadowing and internship opportunities in high school, just getting any early exposure. But I think I would think about it from the perspective of getting exposure. And that's like that's sort of like an experience for you to learn, and rather than sort of anything that colleges or definitely medical schools are really looking for. And it's by no means like an expectation that you do these programs like as a high school student. I think it's mostly for you to sort of get a sense of what a day in the life of a practicing physician is like, and what that looks like and what that feels like.
Okay, I'm gonna maybe bring this to a close with just picking out one final question here. And Michaela and Eric, I don't know if you have the chat open, if you want to have the liberty to choose which one that is. There are still several here that I'm afraid we won't have time for.
Mm-hmm. Michaela, you want to pick the last one?
Let's see. I think maybe, let me make sure. Okay, so kind of to answer maybe 2 in 1, is research experience absolutely necessary for medical school applications? And what kind of extracurriculars do most medical schools prioritize? No, research is not absolutely necessary. I know no medical school wants to see you do something that you're not interested in. That is what they're going to prioritize when they look at your applications. They're going to want to see that you are a well-rounded person, that you did what, like, you know what your interests are, you know who you are as a person, and you like, because that kind of shows them like by applying, like, you know who you are as a person. So by applying to medical school, like, you're dead set on that decision, and like you're very confident about that. They're going to be looking for like commitment in the things that you do. So for instance, I was an RA in medical school, or not medical school, in undergrad, and like that helped me in a lot of different ways. I was able to do it from sophomore to senior year, so that showed like commitment to residential living. I was able to get my housing paid for, so that helped me pay for college basically. And then I was also able to like further show commitment by like taking on extra jobs within residential living, and again going towards like paying for college, but also showing that commitment. So it had nothing really to do with medical school, but like you can spin things certain ways when you go and apply. So I could talk about taking care of people and responding to crisis situations. So I think when you're going into college, do things that you're absolutely interested in, and I think the rest will come. So yeah, of course, like if you're interested in being in a clinic, be in a clinic. But if you're also interested in sports, do what I did and play club field hockey and club softball. Like, don't compromise those things that you really love now.
Great. I feel like this hour was really terrific. And I want to thank Eric and Michaela, and I want to thank the whole group at UpLIFT. And it's great just to see helpers helping others. And this is, I think, a terrific resource. The slides will go out to all of you with this information. And then just to follow up on Fair Opportunity Project, we are running webinars on different subjects pretty much every week now. So if you got an invitation for this event, you'll receive future invitations. Tell your friends. Let us know what you'd like to hear about. And thank you for joining us today.
And thank you so much, Carol, for having us. It was so awesome for us to be able to talk about some of our work and then hopefully kind of spread the word and help make med school more accessible for everybody.
Great.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was a really great time.
Great. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great evening.